So welcome to the show today. Today I have Michael Lewrick on the show, and he's the Chief Innovation Officer at Swisscom Enterprise. And I'm very excited to talk to you today because you're also the author of the Design Thinking Playbook. And at Swisscom, you're in charge of innovation and basically business growth topics. And last time we talked, I think you told me you're basically an entrepreneur within Swisscom. So I'm very interested to dive into that topic. Let's get started right with your story a little bit in that direction. So can you remember one or two defining moments of your journey along the way that really shaped you as a human being or as a leader?
Yeah, of course. Actually, I started really off with my PhD thesis 15 years ago. I had a big chance to look into innovation clusters globally. So my first study was in the cluster Munich, and a lot of high-tech companies there because of Siemens, BMW, other players. And I looked really into the innovation capabilities from a transition from a startup company to a more mature phase of business. It was very interesting. So I looked into all these capabilities, find out it's a correlation between business success and innovation success. And later on, have taken the same model and go to industry. So I looked into large organization, applying the same model basically on the innovation capabilities in these organizations. And doing the studies, I really find out, what is important for innovation or what does not work. And this was really the driver for the last 10 years, how to define entrepreneurship within companies and how to go forward with innovation.
I love that. I love that. And one thing I also want to dive into a little bit is people. Because usually there's moments, very often moments are connected to people. So can you remember maybe one or two or three people along the way that really shaped you and shaped your journey of your career, of the business, of you as a human being?
Well, a lot of people, and actually my recipe to be successful in this area is to, first of all, build trust with people, and if you have trust within the organization, trust to people, you get a lot of freedom. And with the freedom, you're allowed to do experiments. And the experiments really help, to be successful because there's failures, there's success, you have ways to go forward. You can connect not even in the organization, but also to the world outside, building like an entire network of people helping you to realize things. And I think first thing is always trust, then really engage with things, and third, do your experiments with all the freedom you have. And finally, if you have success, you can do even more.
I love that. I love that. And what always fascinates me is, the reasons behind everything. You mentioned trust, and this is something that, in your book, the Design Thinking Playbook, comes up quite often in different shapes and forms. One big shape is empathy. That's a really big one. So maybe you can hold up your book for a second because it's a really cool one.
All of you have seen already. I'm busy on LinkedIn. And actually writing a lot of articles now and blog contribution about how to use design thinking in large organizations. And actually what we did differently in this book, we looked really into the digital transformation. And it's not only design thinking, it always comes to like systems thinking, looking into kind of broader spectrum, how things are connected. We had developed a model really focusing on business ecosystem design. And this is basically the next thing coming along, if you look into like blockchain technology and everything we are talking about, it's really something you can redefine your business, creating new market roles, and being successful in a totally different space as we were before. It's an important thing as a mature company already established, you have all these business connections. It's now really time to use the momentum, see how to tap into new ecosystems, and then realize new business models.
Absolutely. That's also one aspect that I love about the book. Another aspect about the book that I love is that it's actually written in design thinking format. So it's not just about design thinking, but it's created with design thinking, and you actually outline that journey partly as well. So it's just very, very practical. That's one thing I love about this thing. It's just so like visual, practical. I know I got the PDF version, and I need to get the physical version because this is something you really need to play with. It's a playbook, right? So I totally love that one. curious about like what drove you to write this. I mean, was it out of frustration? Was it out of an opportunity? Why did you write this book?
Yeah, actually, we were coming together with a group of people in Switzerland occasionally, meeting every quarter, exchanging experience about innovation, design thinking, best practices, in the industry. And we came to the point saying, we have all these discussions, but we're not sharing this with the outer world. So my idea was, why not having like a conference or writing a blog, and getting all these things out. Another idea was writing a book. And basically everyone was saying, you're crazy, this is like a 5-year project, no one has time and we will never finish. And I said, hey, I take some leadership, I take the role of creating this book. And we invite a couple of experts to get the knowledge from industry, from the universities. And we started to create the book. And then it was quite important, of course, to do this journey, finding like personas out there, working with design thinking on a daily basis. And in the book, we have like 3 personas. One is an entrepreneur. It's a guy from Stanford University. He's starting his blockchain startup in the healthcare industry. And he has a couple of challenges to look into. And of course, the book helps him, to building teams, to build this ecosystem, to look into a couple of methods of experimenting with prototypes. And we did the same thing then for someone out of industry. So basically it's Peter, another character. He is engineer by training, and he has also a couple of challenges within large organizations. First of all, to spread the mindset, but also to look into the entire idea of creating agile teams, And this is really his focus. And the third persona is also quite interesting. It's Lily. Lily is actually from Asia, and she's trying to get this design thinking mindset established in Singapore. And of course, has different challenges because Asia is different. You have different working styles. You have different idea about innovation. And the book is really addressing all these characters with their problems. And this is the starting point. And a lot of people are confused in the beginning from the book, starting reading, because usually books in this space, really basic, they're giving you like the process, there's a design thinking process, and step by step, looking into all these methods and tools. And we didn't like to do this, This is really, our idea was to create like a playbook, you play with things, you adapt it to the culture of your organization, you adapt to the challenge you have to do, and it really gives you the inspiration to do something and not just following step-by-step approach.
I love that. I mean, I also, when I started reading, and I'm already like halfway through since last week, since you introduced me to this, and I love how it's actually built. It's not built like any other book, like you mentioned. It's not like, oh, this is design thinking, here's exactly how it works. And then you're like 90% into the book and pretty much exactly how design thinking is done from a book, but you have no idea how it's really done in the real world, and you've never actually tried it. And what this is really doing, it's encouraging you to just dive right in, just play with it, dive right in. This is really, really cool. Now, another thing I want to talk a little bit about is your role at Swisscom, and also your role in general of being an entrepreneur within an established organization. What is it that drives you, to get up every day and go in there and face all the challenges and deal with all the greatness and all the other things as well? What is it, that drives you to create startups within an organization and build them and make them flourish?
Well, actually, I'm quite happy where I am because it's all about technology, and technology is a driver for everything at the moment. It's a driver for the digital transformation and gives you a lot of new opportunities to create something. And I'm with Swisscom now for 10 years, and we started off like 9 years ago with big data analytics. And in the beginning, everyone would say, it's no business case for us. We should not look into these things. We are basically infrastructure provider. And we have seen it now. It comes differently. Data is really something, it drives a lot of businesses. We see the really companies look just into data as a single business model. And I think it becomes quite important now to see how technology can change your company, your business model, and how to create value out of it. And with the big data, for example, was another trigger for one of the frameworks in the book. So we combined big data analytics with design thinking. And this is actually obvious. You say, okay, you get insights from data, you get insights from human beings, from observations, but actually no one is doing it because you have two totally different personality structures out there. First of all, you have people looking into data. They're more focused like on what they do. And you have like these really outgoing design thinking people, trying to observe people, building up empathy, talking to people, and bringing them together in one team is quite a challenge. But if you manage to do, you get like really great results, over the entire design thinking process, it comes to observations, comes to testings, comes to prediction afterwards, having those worlds together, it's really good to be innovative.
Love that. I mean, I love how you look at technology as a driver for pretty much anything. And I want to stay on that topic for a second and go one level deeper. And what I'm curious about, what is the connection between design thinking, technology, innovation, everything you're involved in? Like, what is it that fascinates you, or that really where you see the biggest impact generated with methodologies like design thinking, for example, or with technology that especially emerging tech right now?
Well, the thing is, in the end of the day, there's always one user, and the user has to have some benefits out of what you're creating. So it doesn't matter if you look into big data analytics, blockchain, you name it, And when I start any kind of project, I first look into the problems out there, For example, like blockchain projects, we look into like the current situation, see what kind of value proposition must be provided to a user, to the client in the end, and then we're building systems, And this must be the starting point. And when you look like to the journeys we outlined in one of my new books, Live from Crypto Valley, it's really giving a snapshot what's happening now here in the Crypto Valley, Switzerland. And we always recommend people, start with design thinking. After your MVP and your minimum viable product, you go into the next step to create a system and coming up then with the minimum viable ecosystem. And this is all iterations, from the start to the end, you iterate, you do it in the small part to create a product, and you do it in the larger part, collaboration with other organizations, if you're building the ecosystem.
Maybe to stay on the topic of ecosystem for a second. This is something that comes up so many times these days, and it's also something that you mentioned quite a few times. What is it about this idea of the ecosystem that fascinates you?
Well, actually, we're now talking about ecosystems are really decentralized ecosystems. So I think in the past, really in the beginning, we had like customer-supplier relationships, And what's happening, you're central, you're working with someone together to expand your value chain. So this was basically 30, 40, 50 years ago. So the last 20 years, we designed like centralized ecosystems. So a lot of platforms were created, you're onboarding your clients, you're onboarding suppliers, and you're trying to create value out of it. So the third maturity step for me is really driven by blockchain, so you have decentralized ecosystems. And decentralized ecosystems have no central aspect. So basically, you as an initiator of an ecosystem must have one market role within the ecosystem. And this is really different from the past because you're not in power and in control of everything. You're starting something, you say, these are the values in my system, and then just goes. And then you have to find your own business model to generate money out of it. And an initiator of such a system, you have to, of course, creating and building and showing to all the other actors in the system how their business models will look like as well, And this is really something complex, but I think it's a great new way of thinking, And what I see now from universities and when I look into industries, people really realize now this is the next thing, And I'm happy that I'm now working on these kind of projects and building ecosystems. And so hopefully we get more industry partners onboarded and create more ecosystems and collaborate much more open than the past.
I love that you mentioned blockchain in this, because very often blockchain is also looked at this thing that most people don't really understand, not necessarily because people don't understand what it does, but what it can be leveraged for today, right? What you go into is basically this idea of the decentralized ecosystem. And if I try to put it in my terms to just understand it better, basically what it does is it allows a much wider and bigger group of individual stakeholders, companies, individuals, whatever, to work together in a very collaborative way without having a central bottleneck that everything needs to flow through. Does that kind of like, is that pretty much what you talked about? Is that pretty much it?
Yes, the idea is really to create together one single value proposition to get something out better than before. And there's one term called blockchain for good at the moment. And it's nothing to do like with like social something or non-profit. It's really that you like to change the system, you know, because a lot of industries have like intermediaries, and the intermediaries taking a lot of money out of the system, you know. And in many cases, you know, it comes to 20-30% of the revenues are just going basically to the middleman. And having systems that are more decentralized, allowing peer-to-peer transactions help a lot, you know, to distribute money more and better and more fair than ever before.
Absolutely, yeah. It just reminds me a little bit of the music industry, you know, kind of the transition that it went through.
Excellent example, you know. So a lot of artists, you know, they're not getting anything out of the music because of music rights, and usually you have like a producer, and finally, you know, the companies distributing music now for like a flat rate for everyone. In the end of the day, the band, you know, and the leader of the band, they're not getting much money out of it, but everyone else does. And actually the artist should get most of it, and all the others should have like a small portion or nothing, you know. And I think this is very come to new systems allowing this kind of fair distribution of money as well.
Very exciting future. Now, I want to take one step back into the past, talk a little bit about lessons learned. Is there some sort of an example case or a story you can tell from your past experience where, you know, something happened or you went through some journey that really taught you a lot, where you learned a really central, really, really important lesson?
Well, at the end of the day, I have failure every day because I work in iterations. So every iterations I learn, you know, I'm not succeeding. I'm getting feedback how the world might look different than my assumption were before. And so I have this like on a daily basis. But on the other hand, of course, there are projects you can't test before because you can't predict, and you have no opinion in the market, no customers to ask about, and then you just go, you know, and then you build something. And then you realize after 1, 2, or 3 years, you know, maybe the regulation has not changed, the market conditions are totally different, or the customer has experienced something totally different, much more better what you have thought about. And of course, that's kind of always a big failure. But on the other hand, you know, this is kind of risk taking, you know, and sometimes you have to take the risk and go forward, even you have no idea how the future will look like. And then basically it's luck, you know, sometimes you have luck, sometimes you don't. And the best thing is to have more projects with a lot of luck, you know, and creating something than the opposite. But it's also part of the game, you know. You can't start like 10 projects and 10 come successful. Usually like 7 fail, 3 are successful, and out of the other 7 you learn for next time. And this is what I do every day.
Do you remember an example of that where, you know, you went through a journey and maybe something specific, something that really has been burnt into your mind because it was so intense, where, you know, you failed more time than not, and at the end of the day you either succeeded or you learned a real big lesson?
Yeah, of course, there are projects we did, you know, don't like to name them because it was all like a lot of people involved. So, but yeah, there was a lot of projects. We were trying really to look into a new market segment, for example. We thought the market will have a different regulation, you know, and after building something for a lot of money, you know, we realized, okay, the market will not open, and it's postponed for 6 years. So, wow, 6 years, that's a long time. And you can't run the solution you have built for 6 years and burn all the money. So what do? You close down, you know, you say, okay, we are wrong with our assumption about the market opening. And then basically you wait, you know, and maybe 4 or 5 years later, it's much more clear what's happening in the market, and then you restart. But then you restart with new technology, a different team, you know, and you build something really then appropriate for this time. And in the end of the day, then you have already experience about the first project, you know, the people in the market, you learned what went well, what went wrong, and finally you much faster than the second one.
This is a big one with regulations, especially. But I think what I heard from there is really important. I think even though this was a big failure initially, or at least something that didn't work, you still not only learned a lot, but you gained a lot because of the networks that were built and basically the trust in the market. This is a big one, I think. Now I want to talk a little bit about leadership. And, within Swisscom, you run this organization basically that's in charge of innovation and expanding the business and everything around that for, the enterprise segment. So how are you able to manage, run, lead, whatever you want to call it, such an organization without, going crazy, by staying sane and keeping some sort of a balance or, mental balance? How are you able to make that happen?
Well, I think what you have to do every day, coming along with a positive mindset, what you do and looking into the bright future, so you start to reframe every day in the morning saying, we go for it, it comes good, and we create something with value. Because otherwise, of course, large organizations, they have politics, they're not fast as a startup, and what you can do, you can live up your own mindset every day, showing people, it might be different. You're just starting things happening, talking to people, opening up to like this entire ecosystem and collaborate. And in the end of the day, something's happening. And I think most important part is that we do something and we change systems. If you just stay in the status quo and say, we're happy as it is today and not questioning the status quo, nothing happens, and that's what I do all the time, I'm always questioning, and sometimes people are not very happy about this attitude because that we can do better, differently, I don't like it, but this is what drives me, changing the system to make it better every day.
I love that. Basically, what you're saying or what I'm hearing is, got to go to work every day and you got to have that bigger picture in mind, that bigger motivation, because that's what's driving you. It's changing the status quo, making things better and improving, everything, hopefully exponentially, not just incremental with everything you're doing. And just, keeping that thread of motivation and inspiration there on a daily basis, no matter what happens. I think that is a big one in there. What does leadership mean to you personally?
Well, personally, it's for me, it's really the mindset, it's always comes to this point that you say, you have to give like the freedom to people and also trust them, what they do. So I got the trust to do my experiments. So I like to give people really also the time to do their experiments and giving all the freedom that they can work on something, creating their own solution. And then coming back and everything they create, we can discuss and iterate, it's not just like it's the final thing and then you're done, So people have different kind of ways of working and you have to allow it, And finally, it's quite important to reflect, to learn, and that the entire team can really go into the next step, And this is actually my way of leading, giving the freedom, come together, discuss things, discuss openly, and then go into the next iteration round.
Very entrepreneurial. I like it. Now, last question I have is a bit more up in the sky, up in the clouds. So imagine you had a magic wand. So you're a magician now, and you had a magic wand, and you could wish for anything you wanted in the world. What would you wish for that could amplify or multiply your impact at least 10 times on your work, the organization, the industry, or on the world?
Yeah, that's a tough question, though. But I think it really always comes to people, And I really like people who have like a little bit the same kind of approach doing things like I do. So I'm working best with like this very intelligent crowd of people, making things happen, getting into a little bit of risk, out of what they do. And I think this helps a lot, and this multiplies myself if I have like the same minded people around me. So every time we discuss, every time we fail together, every time we reflect together, we can grow together, and this helps a lot, It's probably not 10 times, but it's already 3 or 4 times, and this helps a lot, to go into the next level of engagement.
Yeah, so it's about the collaboration, the teamwork, you know, having a smoother, better way of working together, of leveraging each other's strengths, and all these kinds of things. Very cool. I really like it. Amazing interview. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And we're going to link below this video to some of the sources like company page, your LinkedIn profile as well, to the book as well, so people can check it out. So thank you so much, Michael, for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Have a good day. Bye-bye.